Path, where each week we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice while doing our best to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. I'm Joanne Shaw, owner of Down2Earth Landscape Design, and with me is my co-host and co-author, Matthew Dressing. Hi, Matt.
Hello, Joanne, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Matthew Dressing, owner of Natural Affinity Garden Design. As landscape designers and gardeners, we believe it's important and possible to have great gardens, which are sustainable and low maintenance. We want to help you make it happen.
That's right. And according to the calendar, summer is winding down. Fall is around the corner. Thank you for joining us for our September in the Garden episode. What are you looking forward to this September? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our Down the Garden Path podcast Facebook group to share your pictures or ask us questions for about your September garden, right? I think sometimes people put all their like tasks in the heat of summer, like, oh, I'll do that in September. Oh, I'll do that in September. Well, here we are, everybody.
That's right, it's time to get to work. And we're going to help
That's
you navigate all those do's and don'ts on that to do list for you. That's
that's
right.
right.
I
Um,
love September. It is just a nice, cooler month. I love those changes in the season. Yeah, I love it. I love it. But
it always comes too soon. I know my flowering dogwood is already tips or lots of tips of red already. It just
oh,
makes me sad. I know.
yeah,
So yeah, so for some people, seeds and bulbs is what September, the seed catalogs start arriving, the fall bulbs are in the store, the bulb like that's what they're looking forward to, right? Is to planting bulbs.
that's right. Even though the seasons are winding down and the plants are falling to sleep, it's time to plant some new spring hope. And yeah, those spring flowering bulbs are out in your garden centers, your local garden centers right now. And now is the time to plant them for the spring. So definitely check in. Also, take a look online to your favorite seed catalogs or your bulb providers. There's a lot of things you can buy online and have shipped to you as well. But now is the time to start planting that spring, that March, April, May flowering bulb garden for sure. So
Mhm.
planting those bulbs.
Yeah, we should emphasize it might be the time to buy the bulbs, but it is not the time to plant them yet. So if you have your sight set on a specific unique type of plant, type of bulb, then usually those are ones that sell out the fastest. So that's why we recommend you get them and you purchase them soon, but you don't need to plant them. We definitely recommend for a variety of reasons, which we'll cover, really waiting, we'll talk more about it in October of the garden, right? And a little bit in November in the garden, where it's okay to plant them later in the season. And it's often beneficial, especially if you're battling critters.
Right. And critters is the main one. They're smart. They can smell that we've disturbed the soil. They can see that we've disturbed the soil. And they know that they bury food. So why are we burying food? Let me check it out. And then they steal all those beautiful, hard won, all those beautiful plants that you're looking forward to and plant them somewhere else or eat them. So just wait. We want the cooler months to settle in and let them start to think about housing and overwintering themselves so they don't go digging in. But yeah, so wait a little bit longer. Buy them now because you won't get those special, really cool ones for early spring. But don't plant them now because you might lose them to, again, those big critters for sure. For sure.
Yeah, and if you already have bulbs in your garden, like dahlias and cannas, and you can continue to deadhead them and look after them. It's still soon to dig them up, so it's not time to dig them up either. So those are a big part, especially dahlias. I find are very popular in people's gardens, and sometimes in the September they're just coming into their own, right? So don't worry, you've still got lots of time. You can deadhead them. Make sure you stake some of those ones with the big heads. And so don't worry that there will be time. And if now is the time to take pictures of how those turned out, so you know what to buy for next year if you wanted to expand your collection.
That's right. And if you do bring them in and you wake up in early spring and you go, oh, what was that one? Or what did that look like? Oh, yeah, I took a picture of it for sure. So,
Mhm.
our regular, hey, don't forget to garden journal. and take pictures for sure.
That's right. That's right. And we will definitely feature how to dig them up and how to care for them over the winter in October in the garden.
That's right. So stay tuned for that episode as well. So
Hmm.
bulbs we're going to wait on, and veggies start to become
Hmm.
harvest season that late August, early to mid September. We're starting to see, especially a lot of the farmers markets and local farmers, a lot of their varieties opening up. But we may also be removing and cleaning spaces in our garden to get prepared for winter. But there are a few things we can still plant as well. So things like our kales, our cool season radishes, lettuces, overwintering onions. There are some fruit or more, so vegetables, my apologies, that we can be planting for quick fall harvest. So if you are like fresh greens, cut and come again lettuces or musculin greens, you need some radishes or some fresh lettuce. That's great. You were talking one year about planting some Walla Walla onions. They're a great overwintering onion for us
Are
here in
they?
the GTA. Yeah, they'll survive over our winter. So I don't think you did it last year, but I was
Mhm.
wondering if it was plans in your veggie garden for this year.
No, we have the Egyptian walking onions, so they
Oh
seem to
yeah, that's
be
right.
like so prolific that they've taken care of our onion, but they are a different onion, right? As opposed to like the Walla Walla, the bigger onions. So, do you know if onions? Because my challenges of growing garlic is the competition with other plants. Are onions the same thing, or do they like not like? Because I want to plant things in amongst my garden, like
Yeah, as far as I know, they're not as picky for competition as garlic is, but you would definitely get, I think, a little bit bigger of an onion for sure. But yeah, I
Mm,
mean, I think of when I go visit, pick your own places, and I see the pick your own onions, the reds and the whites. They're all jammed in like bulb to bulb to bulb
yeah.
in the bed, and they're big and ripe and beautiful. So again, I still think they're as picky, and as long as they've got a good soil and they've got some good food, I bet you'd have better growing that way too in your
Yeah,
garden. Better
yeah.
than garlic
We're gonna
amongst
have to,
others.
yeah, we're gonna have to chat with our friend Julia and get like maybe we do an onion episode because I think they're an easy thing for people to grow if you know what you're doing and
Yes,
you had some coaching, right?
that's right. So as we get into veggies and gardens, as we're winding down the season, remember, do we want to continue to remove dead and diseased fruit, any diseased or dead
Mm,
plants? It's time to take those away and start cleaning up and preparing for the winter. So any green and immature tomatoes, we can channel those energy into just ripening. We can prune up our tomato plants and let them go. Remember the bush or the determinate tomatoes? They're probably done if you have them,
mm,
or if they were very early, they might be getting you your second bloom. But it takes a long warm season for that to happen. And if you have the
yeah.
indeterminate or the staking ones, remember they're going to go to continue to frost. So you don't have to really worry about getting rid of those just yet. But it's more so, the maintenance and removing the dead things and the disease things as we get ready to go to sleep.
Hmm. And our herbs, if you grow a lot of herbs, now is a good time while they're still like really fresh and they haven't dried out and gone to seed too much. Now is a good time to pick those herbs and kind of chop them up, and you can freeze them. You can do like the flash freeze in on a cookie sheet in your freezer. You can puree them and put them in ice cube trays. So it's a good way. Sometimes I feel like we want to do them and we forget about it until it's too late and a frost has hit them and they're kind of
Definitely.
looking a little sad and there's nothing worse than having to find the good leaves in amongst the mushy leaves, right? So
Yes.
yeah, so there's no reason why it's going to keep growing. So if you wanted to do that at the beginning of September, even though the herbs are doing great, that's okay because it'll keep growing. We've often had a warm Septembers, especially lately, last few years, right? So some things that were herbs especially may keep going. So but it's just a little on our show. We're just giving you a little reminder of a to do that you can do in September. And herbs, get your oregano and your mint, your chives, that type of thing. Basil, especially, picked while it's still
Yeah.
looking good to save it for the winter.
That's right. Because as we talk about September now, it's nice and warm, but you know what? September can change you never know. So just be prepared and keep these in mind. That's
That's
right, for
right.
sure.
That's right.
We can also extend our cold season too. If you have cold frames, maybe you've started. We talked about
Mm.
cold frames with I think Julia and a couple of other of our listeners way back when with Nikki Jabor. Have you started some cold frames? Are you extending your season? But now would be the time if you haven't. A good time to build them and prepare them and get them ready as well to go over the season. So basically, that cold frame is just a mini in-ground greenhouse which we can continue to extend the life and trap some of that heat. But now would be a good time to build one or get them ready as well as we go through September for the cool season.
Hmm. Now that they're so much more popular, you probably can find them readily available online. But I know a few years ago you really couldn't. So
Yeah,
clients really, really needed someone to build it for them. So yeah, so that's something to think about.
that's right.
Hmm.
Annuals and perennials. As
Hmm.
our perennials or as our annuals start with annuals, they are going to start to look a little bit ragged if they haven't from the heat that we just saw in August. But there's a lot of new fall cool season annuals popping out to refresh your garden center benches, including mums, ornamental cabbage and kales, asters. We're going to see some more alyssums and ivies. Uh, Lots of different little guys to pop
Hmm.
in and replace those tired looking um, summer annuals that may have not quite made it this far. So take a look, remove what you need to, and we can replant and start to dress up our little spots in our gardens, but also in our container gardens as well. Or maybe it's time to buy a whole new container because our September containers, our
Yeah.
summer containers, aren't looking fresh anymore. So putting out a
Mhm.
nice September container. Did I maybe miss mums in that list of
Yeah,
annuals?
well, you know how much I love moms, but I think also if you're especially if you're listening to this episode right at the beginning of the month, you can even just giving your summer annuals a bit of a haircut
Yeah.
early in September. I think you may, and if something is dead, then absolutely dig it out with a gardening shovel and plant something new in, like a kale or like a small mum or something like that. But I think a lot of time, just especially because if September's still warm, you can do some pruning, in actually pretty hard pruning, and in a week or so it's going to be blooming again. So that is a way to just pay attention and not give up, because I think sometimes people just like, oh, it's September, I give up on my annual. Mums are coming, I'll wait till October and put the mums in. But I feel like it's a missed opportunity. And that they really, you've spent a lot of money on them, really in May and June. So get as long uh, bloom and show as you can from them. And I like to, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the fall products, the fall plants, and I like to just extend my season as long as I can with my summer containers. And then I go right into winter because I just feel like fall is so short, right?
It is, yeah. It is really short. And like you said, you spend all that time and energy keeping them looking
Yeah.
fabulous. Just keep them looking fabulous. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But if they're gone, and
Yeah.
don't feel bad about uh, buying a new one. Oh, that's fall flavored.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Speaking of,
so but certainly you don't need to be fertilizing or anything like that, because it's as the season's winding down, right?
yeah, yeah, you can stop your fertilizing, or if you're continuing your every 2 week fertilizing, you're almost at Thanksgiving where you're going to be ending it anyways. So
Yeah,
definitely. Speaking
exactly.
of other new things to buy and pop in,
Hmm.
perennials. A lot of
That's
our
right.
independent garden centers, they're not going to overwinter a lot of those perennial plant material or plant selections. So not that there's not a lot of beautiful fall blooming perennials, but they have some of those older perennials that might have struggled a little bit in those pots. And now we're going to start to see a lot of perennial sales starting to happen. So visit your independent garden centers. They're going to be getting rid of some of those perennial materials.
Hmm.
And you're not really, again, remember, you're not going to buy the big, beautiful spring, spring ground cover phlox or, a lungwort or something. You're going to be buying the root ball. So, make
Hmm.
sure there's something there, but check on that root ball in the pot because she'll be able to overwinter and reward you with new foliage as a thank you for finding her a new home. But we can get some great summer and spring material or some unusual cultivars at a discount now going in through September. But September is the time to buy as garden centers, as are
Hmm.
again preparing for fall and winter, we start to throw some of that out. So take a look to add some of those gaps. Remember, go back in your summer garden, in your spring garden, and look at those pictures you've already taken. What holes are you missing, right? And what do they
Yes.
have that are spring blooming now at a discount that I can pop in there amongst maybe my spring flowering bulbs, or
Hmm.
later in the spring when we get into April and late May kind of deal. So
That's
yeah,
right.
so take a look.
And native plants, right? Because often, I
Hmm.
mean, the native plant trend is just beginning. It's going crazy. And I know I did that last year where I bought a whole bunch where literally I was buying empty pots and they were 40% off and they were the coconut coir pots. So all I had to do was put
Yeah,
them in the ground. And, I thought I had nothing to lose. Most of our native plants, or many of our native plants, tend to be spring. They come up in the spring. So I was rewarded where all of those plants came back. My mayapple, my ginger, it was really great. My columbine, they did great. Several ferns. So if you're looking for things, especially for the shade, I think any native plant really, keep in mind you do need to make sure that there is something there as far as a
yes.
root ball, but you're not they could be sad look plants looking in the pot. But yeah, so it's a good time to do that. If you do want to, some people prefer to divide their hostas in the spring. I've always kind of preferred to do it in the fall. So if you do have some of your plants while the weather's good and that you want to divide, like hostas, maybe not ornamental grasses because I like leaving those up so the birds can eat the seeds and stuff. So I don't recommend you trimming them down. But some of the other perennials that might be getting a little big, maybe even like ground cover phloxes and things like that, where you can actually divide them where you know what they are and where they want to go. The later in the season you're like, oh, I wanted to divide that. Now where did it go? Right. Well,
Yeah,
while you still know what it is and it's still getting a good amount of rain and you're still kind of in the garden, that's something that you can do.
that's right. Peonies is one of the popular
Oh, yeah.
spring, early summer. Now is the time to definitely divide our peonies. She is
Hmm.
definitely
Or
a
move
small
them,
one
right?
and move them. Right now is the time to dig them up, divide them, and shift them around. So if you have a big, beautiful clump, maybe you noticed it's just getting too big for the space, or she bloomed and she just opened up, split in half, and just didn't look good for the rest of the summer. That's a signal to dig them up and break them in half. Coming into our September, one of the popular September flowers is our sedum, like our autumn joy sedums,
Mm-hmm.
right? So with nice big flat umbel flowers that are pinks in late August and into September. One of the signs to divide them is that perfect dome will start to crack down the middle, and that's when
Uh,
we're gonna make a note of that now as she blooms and does her thing and reaches max size. We can divide her and do that as well. Yeah.
okay.
So,
And back to peonies, some of the nicer peonies are the more expensive peonies. So the
mhm.
Itoa or the Japanese tree peonies, they tend to be a little in the spring when they're first coming out in the garden centers. They can be a little price prohibitive, but in the fall you can get some. You keep your eyes open if you are a peony aficionado. You can find some great deals on, a fern leaf peony or an Itoa peony. Uh, and even though it might be, when I'm saying the sale price might be $50, which still seems like a lot of money, but in the spring it's going to be $100, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
if you, and again, it's not something you're going to buy a ton of. You just, people like to have one or two in their garden, and they're always like not a focal point, like a conversation piece, I feel, because they are so
Yeah.
different. The tree peony is a different shape and it's a different bloom that has a different leaf. They get nice and tall. So they definitely can be a nice conversation piece. I have a couple of fern leaf peonies and my neighbors just like always stop me and ask me what that is. So yeah, so that's something to keep in mind. And don't be shocked when you see that in September, October, it's $50 because it was probably $100
Yeah.
in the spring. So they're coming down, but they are a little bit more expensive. So that is definitely something to think about. And now is also the time to see if there's anything disease that you might need to pay attention to, that type of thing that to kind of keep an eye on as well, right? That you want to get
Yeah.
ahead of.
Yeah, if we know we've had a powdery mildew issue on things like
Mhm.
our peonies or bee bombs or, even one of the
Nine bark.
trees,
Mhm.
nine barks, right? As things start to fall and let go through summer, make sure we're always collecting those and disposing of those, not putting them into our compost piles or into things are like our green litter bags where they might, start again in the compost or something like that. Yeah, so always keeping it clean for disease pests and diseases. The other thing too is we talked about our cannas and our fall bulbs that might be out.
Mhm.
As September goes, again, September, who knows? But watching the temperatures, we don't want it to start in the nights to get too much below 16 degrees Celsius. And again, I apologize to our American listeners, whatever that is in Fahrenheit, but that 16 is the signal that tropical winter is beginning. We may want to consider bringing our tropical bulbs inside,
Mhm.
or more so our tropical plants. So if you have like a
Right.
croton or a ficus or a cast iron plant, those ones we're going to use and keep green in our house over the winter.
Hibiscus, right?
Hibiscus,
Yeah, hibiscus plants. They tend to be very popular patio plants. So yes, we
right.
want to bring them in before it gets too cool.
Right, before they get shocked and they start to get into a dormancy kind of phase. So keep an eye on those as well. September lawn care, a big topic, but I think we'll just graze over it now because we've got
Yeah.
lots of fantastic episodes on seasonal lawn care and nematodes, etc. But now is the time, speaking of nematodes, we're in the middle of grub season or the beginning of grub season, kind of more in the
Hmm.
beginning middle. But, applying nematodes or treating for them as the season or the nights cool and the days cool, it's now time to grow those cool season grasses. So if you're in the northern United States or here in Canada, as those seasonal temperatures start to cool, the grass is going to thrive again. We're going to see that growth and that regreening. So just making sure that we're top dressing the lawn, reseeding the lawn, keeping things moist, and applying our controls for any of those grubs or other issues under the soil. Now is the time to be doing that for our lawn care as well.
That's right. And the other big lawn issue is crabgrass. I think
Yes.
now is the time before it goes to seed. So watch for it in your lawn. They tend to be a little bit brighter green, a wide leaf in your grass. They can kind of hide in the grass and the lawn a little bit. And you think, yeah, it's green, it's not a big deal. Well, you want to get those out and pull them out because next year, the seeds that it starts to sprout will create weeds for next year. So
Right.
and you could have twice as much next year if you don't deal with it this year. So and sometimes you have to go over to your neighbor's lawn and pull their crabgrass out too, or anything that's growing along the curb or the sidewalks, because those will all be headaches for you next year. And it's one of those weeds that you kind of need to stay on top of. So watch for crabgrass. It can be very prolific. And it's really important. It's easy to come out after rain or after you've wet it. Before it goes to seed, they're actually fairly easy to come out.
That's right. And the key is,
Yeah.
like you said, right before seed, because the grass itself is an annual, so it will die.
Hmm.
But it's
Yes.
those seeds, getting them before they seed or drop those seeds, that's the key for sure. For sure.
Yes. And you don't want to you want to pull them out before you cut your grass, because I think that's what a lot of people do is like, oh, I'm cutting them off because I am cutting the lawn. But no, you're just spreading the seeds. If
Yeah,
they've already gone to seed, now you're just spreading those seeds as you chop them up and mulch them into your grass. So
exactly,
that's
exactly. You need to see them as they're starting to grow the seeds if you're going to mow. But
mhm,
once they have those heads on them, they mature quick and they drop hundreds of seeds.
that's right. That's right. So,
Deciduous.
what do we do with trees and shrubs?
Yes, our deciduous trees and shrubs. What are we doing those? Again, we want to make sure that we're enjoying lots of fall things
Mhm.
that are blooming, our hibiscuses, our hydrangeas, rose of Sharon's. There's lots of things that we're going to still enjoy throughout the season. Don't have to
Mhm.
worry about pruning them or taking care of them. Enjoy them, let them do their thing. We are going to prune the fall blooming things in the spring or
That's right.
early winter, depending on where you are and what your
Mhm.
early winter looks like. But
That's
continuing to
right.
can clean disease and dead things, we can always prune and take away.
That's right. And if there is nothing blooming, so that's something to keep in mind too. I know we're always saying about taking pictures in your garden. So if you come to September, mid-September, and you find your garden's kind of like boring now, or there's nothing really blooming, now is the perfect time to go pick up a hydrangea, pick up a rose of Sharon to add color. It might be looking like almost done now. And again, that's a deal that you can find at a garden center near you. But by next September, you know it's going to be looking amazing, probably even sooner. So that's something to keep in mind is every month to kind of take a look and see where do you have a hole, where do you have something not blooming. It's always easy to have a June garden, but having a garden still look good in September takes a little bit of, and October takes a little bit of planning.
That's right. And we talked about the perennial sales for the summer and the spring stuff. Don't forget, independent garden centers, there are those beautiful things that are looking good now. They're still bringing in things like that, the burning bushes and those more popular
Mhm.
hydrangeas. So you might see some sales, maybe not as deep, but there is some fresh material to be buying as
Yes.
well.
Yes, because the growers are still growing. And if you're
Yeah,
dealing with landscapers, landscape designers, landscape contractors, we're buying from a farm, a grower. So they are always going to have new stock. So there's not necessarily the deals, but you can get fresh, great product.
that's right. It's late summer and fall is technically still ahead of us.
Hmm.
So yeah, most of September is actually still summer. But yeah, so don't forget to check out those. But speaking of newly planted things, when we get into our evergreens, remember our
Mm,
evergreens are evergreen. We need to make sure not only for our evergreens, but especially important for evergreens, making sure that we're keeping up on the watering of our newly planted material.
yeah.
They don't have the root system yet. They need to have access to water. We have had some drought in some certain places across the country and into the States. So if you've planted something, making
Hmm.
sure that we're going to be making sure they're well watered. Remember, the evergreens are evergreen. They've got the leaves, they're out, they're open. They will continue to lose water to the heat and the wind, especially more so the dry, windy weather going into the fall. So making sure that they're well watered once a week until that ground really starts to become frozen, especially here in the northern areas. Once that ground is
Hmm.
frozen, there's still some water there for those lower roots to pick up if possible. Yeah.
Yeah. If you do have an evergreen that you want to transplant or move, September is a good time to do that.
Hmm.
But you do, have to follow those rules of making sure it's well watered up until the frost. So not just the day you plant it or move it, you have to keep watering it. And it's a good time to top dress your gardens. Like our last episode, we talked a bit about mulch and the benefit of mulch. Then that's something that you can do. Compost is also we didn't deep dive into that as a mulch, but compost is always good for your garden to improve the soil. But so now is a good time to do that. So if you're moving anything, like we mentioned about moving, dividing and moving many perennials, any peonies, that type of thing, shrubs, evergreens, it's a really good time to point to consider the water as well as the adding some compost and mulch to those areas as well.
That's right. So, as we round out our September in the Garden episode, if you're familiar with our book, Down the Garden Path, step by step to your Ontario garden, but a lot of the information applies to wherever you are in your garden or in the world. We have our design favorites. So, what is
That's
your
right.
September design favorite uh, for your
In the
September garden?
in our book. My favorite is Roseanne geranium. It is a long blooming perennial in the garden. It starts blooming in May and it is still blooming in September, and it will still be blooming when snow falls in November. So it has got beautiful violet blue flowers, and it really brightens up a space. It really does. It does tend to get large and almost shrub-like and kind of sprawly. It's easy to control, but for something, and the bees love it. So it's not a
Mhm.
native plant, but it definitely is an attractant to pollinators. I know the bees love it. So it is my sure thing. I think if every my book, I actually today I had to take a photograph for somebody of it underneath. My neighbor has it underneath her ginkgo on her boulevard, and it's covered the base of the whole boulevard. And I just think to myself, man, if everybody's boulevard didn't have grass and it had Roseanne geranium instead, it would be a bright street. So how about you? What is your favorite September plant design
Yes.
favorite?
One of my design favorites is the Scentlandia Sweet Spire. So it's
Ooh.
an Itea. It's a North American native shrub. So it's a nativar, one of our North American native shrubs. Blooms in early summer. It can have some fragrance to it, but I love it at this time of year for a replacement to the burning bush. So it doesn't get as big as the dwarf burning bush, which is going to be 5 by 5, 6 by 6. Scentlandia is only going to be 2 by 2 to 3 by 3, but still give you lots of rich purples and reds and even some yellows in the fall garden. So I find that it's a beautiful rival or even substitute to,
Ah,
especially in smaller spaces, to the
right.
classic dwarf burning bush, which everybody is familiar with, right? You get
Hmm.
in this middle of summer, where's the burning bush? Well, it's not burning.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I love the shape and the size. The color is formidable, but you also get some beautiful early summer flowers. And as a North American native cultivar, so
That's right.
always with our natives.
Yes, and there has been a bit of concern that the burning bush is becoming a bit invasive. The little seeds that the burning bush has on it, the birds do eat and then take into nature, and you know what that happens. And so it is, a little bit of a concern, and is starting to appear on those lists about invasive plants. So moving towards something like that is a great idea.
That's
So,
right.
uh, so thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this September in the garden. It can be an exciting month.
That's right. Lots to do and lots to still look forward to. So, thank you everyone for joining us here on this episode of Down the Garden Path. I'm Matthew Dressing here with my co host and co author, Joanne Shaw. Joanne and I enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path, bringing you interesting and relevant topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from our research and from the guests that join us here on the show.
That's right. And don't forget to spend time with us down the garden path by following us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And our sign there is, our handle is at the Down the Garden Path podcast, at Down the Garden Path podcast. You can also find us on your favorite podcast provider. And while you're there, please hit subscribe to be notified of new content. And don't forget to like, share, and leave us a comment or a review. We love hearing from our listeners. You can also always write us at down the garden path podcast at hotmail.com or via our websites. You can find me at down the garden path, or sorry, you can find me at down2earth.ca and Matt at naturalaffinity.ca.
Thank you again, everyone, for joining us here down the garden path, and we look forward to you joining us next episode. Until then, take care.
Bye for now.